So talking about the full moon in Scorpittarius on June 17th, 2019. So check it out. So it's Sam here, and you're wondering, why am I saying the full moon is in Scorpittarius? Obviously that's a combination of Scorpio and Sagittarius. I'm so clever. We have this full moon chart up right here. As we see, the moon is very early in Sagittarius on this Purnima. You see the Purnima has just happened, or I'm sorry, the Purnima is the full moon tithi. And that means that we're about to start this 30-day cycle, or I'm sorry, we're about to have this full moon as the midway point of the previous cycle. And it can show us a couple important points. It can really illustrate a couple important points as well that we can see. Now, first of all, as you see, this is about right when it happens. You see the sun is at 1:45 of Gemini, and the moon is at 1:37 of Sagittarius, exactly opposite. If I move this forward an hour, then you see this tithi changes to Krishna Pratipada, and Pratipada is the first lunar day. So I do these full moons based on the exact sort of moment when it happens. You see it goes from Purnima to Pratipada. And so I show this because this Purnima is mainly happening in Scorpio. Again, because it's about 24 hours, this tithi. And you see if I go back let me go backwards. If I go back 1, 2, 3, 4 hours before the moon is in Scorpio. So the Purnima, the actual full moon day, is the last day. The last 12-degree portion, which is the 15th tithi, is called Purnima. So it's actually the day sort of before the exact moment of the full moon, the exact Purnima. So you can see that on that Purnima day, if I go back, I just went back 4 hours, but if I go back the remaining sort of 20 hours when the Purnima started, these are all hours, I'm clicking back. You see during this whole Purnima time, the moon is in Scorpio. It's probably going to change to Chaturdashi right here. So this is Shukla Chaturdashi, which is the 16th at 1:15 a.m. So right now I'm recording this on, I'll just pull up a whole new chart. I'm recording this on, it's in Chaturdashi, but you know the moon is at 1348 of Anurata, and it's in Shukla Chaturdashi, right? And the moon is at 1348. So the actual Purnima tithi starts at about 20. Let me pull up this. So I'm just showing you this. I want you to be able to see how this works. You'll see this next hour, it moves to Purnima at about 19 degrees, 18 to 19 degrees. And I'm recording it now with the moon in Anurata at 13 degrees. So this is what we're looking at when we're doing these full moon forecasts. We're looking at the exact degrees, because exact degrees are really everything. That's how you can tell what we're actually looking at. So we have this Scorpittarius energy. So for much of the full moon day, which is mostly tomorrow, Sunday, and into early Monday, again, depending on where you live in the world, that full moon is going to be mostly in Scorpio. There'll be a lot of that Scorpio energy. So that'll be Sunday and then into Monday. And so you'll feel that on Sunday, especially, it's like a full moon in Scorpio. And, that's certainly shows a lot of potential for the triggering and the the intensity that can come from Scorpio, where we become sort of emotionally triggered and emotionally frustrated. We might then get into emotional battles and struggles with people. And of course, we tend to feel like they deserve it, because how dare you make me unhappy when the point of life is for me to feel emotionally happy. And you did something that I perceive as not making me happy. I want to get a reaction out of you, and I didn't get it. This is one of the negative qualities of Scorpio, want to get reactions, and then get frustrated when they don't get the reaction or whatever it might be. Again, in the deepest sense, Scorpio is about a lot of devotion, what's called bhakti, and particularly in Anuradha Nakshatra, there's a lot of that bhakti. Again, this is a potential, but anywhere in Scorpio, there's also the potential to be triggered and then to lash out and get into emotional battles with people and struggles with them and kind of wear them out a little bit. In Scorpio, we not only wear others out, we wear ourselves out. Like if people have a lot of planets in Scorpio, they can wear themselves out with emotional fatigue and drama. So we all got to be aware of this as this full moon comes, to not just get, sort of addicted to the adrenaline rush, the emotional adrenaline of Scorpio, and to just want, again, sort of drama, positive or negative, and instead transform that and take it deeper into that devotional space where the potential for emotions becomes devotional. And again, we're kind of all over the spectrum, especially if people have a lot of planets in Scorpio or important ones. It's sort of the whole gamut. They might be devotional in one sense, but full of drama in others, particularly relationships or other kinds of things where there's a lot of personal desire. That's always the problem with taking us out of our heart, out of our true heart, is where there's desire and there's attachment. Then we usually become not very devotional, right? We become emotional and triggered and get into battles. Where there's selflessness, whether there's pure love for, again, I always use the examples of children or pets or even friends, especially in this sign, and especially the nakshatra of Anuradha, which is ruled by the god Mitra. And I always use the example of Radha, who wasn't Lord Krishna's lover, but it was his friend. This sort of God as divine friend. Look at how gracious and spacious and loving you are to your friends, because you don't want anything from them. Again, and this isn't just for Scorpios. People who think, well, I don't have anything in Scorpio, he's not talking to me. No, I'm talking to everybody. These are universal principles. Whether there are planets there or not, for example, right now in the sky we have Jupiter in Scorpio, and it's been going back and forth. So for the entire last year, we've been learning the lessons of Scorpio. A few years before that, Saturn went through Scorpio. So these have been big lessons for the last few years, right? So these are universal lessons. When someone has planets there, it becomes more of a personal issue for them, right? And so, again, this is why you hear, this section of the sky has to do with understanding that. And rather than getting into emotional battles of will and struggles that are often triggered by the desires to win or to feel respected or appreciated and all those other kinds of things, which are perfectly fine. But the Scorpio energy isn't the one that transforms them. It really shows that emotional courage that is in its highest sense expressed as devotion, because devotion takes a lot of emotional courage. Surrender takes a lot of emotional courage. That's the highest quality of Scorpio, that emotional courage, not just the drama to get triggered and fight emotional battles. The only emotional battle is with our own triggering, actually. And then have the courage to be devotional and to surrender and to connect to our heart rather than, in the real negative sense, attack someone else and justify it because they hurt you or because of some justification. A lot of this has to do with the nakshatra of Jyeshta, which is related to Lord Indra, who was always getting into battles, especially in later Puranic texts. In the Vedas, he was the great hero, that emotional heroism. Again, for surrender, for devotion. But then later, in the Puranic texts especially, Puranic meaning of the Puranas, this is where you see, Indra becoming more of a secular force of, in our mind. In many ways, the Puranas are quite psychological, particularly like Srimad Bhagavatam and Mahabharata, and all of the Puranic texts, because they have a lot of stories. Leelas is what they're called. And there are a lot of the Leelas and stories of Krishna and the avatars of Lord Vishnu, like Lord Rama, Lord Krishna. And it tells these stories that illustrate those energies in our daily life, in our outer life. So then you see these forces, these gods from the Vedas, are then sort of brought into the realm of human motivation. So then we see different motivations come forth. And Indra in the Puranic texts is often portrayed even somewhat a little bit of like a buffoon, a little bit, where he's always messing things up because of his ego, somewhat. So remember that deep devotion, which is the highest quality of this nature, especially of that Indra transformation, and that transformation where rather than getting triggered and being involved and getting into emotional battles, we actually go into deeper devotion and have the emotional courage to work through these things ourselves and not attack others. And again, this full moon is also happening on this Jeshta Mula Gandanta point. Very volatile axis right now, of course, because we're about to have eclipses, and the sun just moved into the sign with Rahu. So this, the next lunation cycle after this one is the is the new moon solar eclipse, as you see. So right, hours before, and when we have this full moon, it's happening right on the Gandanta point. And again, the Gandanta is when the moon is in like the last degrees, maybe even the last nakshatra padas, but especially like from, Sunday night, June 16th to these are Pacific times, 8 p.m. until the full moon the next day. So from 8 p.m. Sunday night, this is Pacific time, until the full moon, which happens again at about 2 a.m. in the morning, 1 a.m., 2 a.m. in the morning. There's a lot of triggering going on, right? So I'll be with my guru. I'll be with my guru in LA, so that's a good time to be with a guru, but I got to be careful because there's a lot of drama that surrounds being with Amachi, the hugging saint. Because there's a lot of people around, and I know a lot of them, and little dramas going on here and there that I got to be vigilant toward and not get triggered or whatever. But it's harder to trigger me these days. When people come at me with triggers these days, I've gotten really good at just ignoring it. I have to at this point. At some point someone's not honoring and being kind or whatever it is, attacking me or pulling me into something, trying to get me to fight with them or something, because it happens. I can't do it anymore. I just don't want to go there. So, and people don't like it when they want to fight with you and you don't want to fight back. It's like, that can make them angrier. And I get less angry. Somebody gets angry or when someone gets triggered, and they maybe want to argue or fight, and I just ignore it. I'm not ignoring them. I'm just avoiding the confrontation. I'm actually hoping that they'll realize that they're being a fool and either apologize or start speaking kindly again or nice again. But often that's not what happened. That's not what happens. When you don't engage, people think you're ignoring them in an aggressive way, when actually you're just avoiding getting into negativity, because we all have a choice over our own mind. And this is something that I wanted to talk about, especially with the difficult Scorpio energy. Sometimes it can be one of these things where ignoring is actually a passive-aggressive thing, because it's an aggressive thing. Some people ignore aggressively. They're ignoring someone. The act of ignoring someone is kind of like, some people take it as a hostile act, like it's an action to actively ignore someone, when often it's not. It's just, I'm not going to engage in this. And you can tell what it is. You can tell how whether or not you're actually ignoring someone in a passive-aggressive way, or whether or not you just really don't want to engage because this interaction is not worth engaging. They're two very different mentalities. Here's how you can tell, and I've figured this out because I've been on both ends. We've all been on both ends. If you get angrier the longer you ignore the person, then you're ignoring them, because you're ignoring them to get an effect. You're ignoring them because you are trying to punish them. So if you're ignoring is because you're trying to punish them and it doesn't work and they still don't engage, then you're going to get angrier. The longer the ignoring goes on and it doesn't have its effect, you're going to get angrier. If you're simply not engaging because you don't want to deal with the person's anger and hostility, and you're really not angry, you just don't want to engage, then over time you're going to feel less anger and less triggering, and you're going to be more willing and more accommodating and more forgiving over time. So notice, this is how you can tell. This came to me a few months ago, about a month or maybe 2 months ago, where I realized this, like, situations that go on where, let's say you're not talking with someone and you notice they get angrier and you're actually less angry, or you're less, because in fact, like with myself, most of the time when I don't engage, it's not because I'm angry. It takes out to get me really angry at someone, and I mean angry at them to where I would ignore them in order to punish them. That's just not the way I operate. I mean, I can get angry. It's usually a flash. It's usually frustrating and something comes out. I express it and it passes. I don't hold grudges. I mean, I remember things, but I don't hold a grudge where I'm angry at someone. I avoid things not because I'm angry at the person, but because I want to avoid the situation. And I want to avoid it because it's like not worth my time. Because I know that if I engage with this, I'm just engaging in something that I'm not getting anything out of, and it's just pointless. It's pointless to have a fight and an argument in this situation. I'll have a fight and an argument about something that's worthwhile if I think the other person's going to listen. If I think it's worth it, I certainly will. I'll engage with them. But if I see that it's pointless, particularly if I don't know the person very well, or whatever the situation is, I'll ignore it. I'll avoid it. Not because I'm mad at them, but because it's pointless. Again, on the other side of that, I'll see people that think, and a lot of it is projection, because they ignore someone in order to punish them. They punish them with their, quote, ignoring. They're doing it to punish them, and then when it doesn't work, they get angrier and angrier. And they get more angry. They get angrier the longer their ignoring tactic doesn't work. So if it's a tactic that someone is using to punish, if you're doing it to punish someone, again, that's called passive aggressive. That's one of the most common forms of passive aggression, is ignoring someone, blatantly ignoring them, and thinking and using your ignoring or withholding your attention in order to punish them. So think about it. If over time you get angrier and angrier because your tactic to punish them doesn't work, then you're probably in a passive-aggressive, punishing, ignoring mode. And that's that's one of the negative qualities of Scorpio, which can get into this kind of passive-aggressive, punishing, punishment by ignoring and withholding attention or whatever it is. Again, maybe not. Maybe you're not engaging, or you're, quote, ignoring because you just realize it's useless. to engage. In that sense, you're not drained by it. You're also not angry about it. And you're also don't want to engage. You literally don't want to engage. Like if you really wanted to engage, but you were ignoring them by punishing them, then again, what that is a bad communication. Like you don't know how to communicate because you actually want to engage with the person, but don't feel like you're going to get what you want. So you ignore them, try to punish them so that when you do engage, it's what you want. Again, when you're just not engaging, you actually don't want to engage. Like you actually don't want to engage with this person because it's toxic or whatever is going on. It's not going to be what you want. So you actually don't want to engage and you're happy to not engaging. Again, if you're punishing and ignoring, you actually want to be engaging, but you don't know how to communicate any better. So the only thing you got is punishing, ignoring, getting triggered because it's not working, because your punishment tactic isn't working and you're getting angrier and angrier. So we all cycle through this when we're younger. That's the kind of thing we do. I did it when I was younger for sure. Even older, at times, when you're purposefully ignoring someone in an aggressive way to punish them. So these are the kinds of behaviors that we can get into with the negative Scorpio energy. And again, the positive Scorpio energy is about, instead of getting into all that stuff, we really literally connect with our heart and we feel the beauty and love and joy and that's there. And we have the courage to surrender and be devoted, because it takes a lot of courage. As I said, I'm going to go see my guru Amachi tomorrow. And, it takes a lot of courage to be around a being like that a lot. Many people will go and be around her. Maybe, they'll sort of go and sort of on the surface kind of enjoy it, because it's, she gives out hugs and there's a band and it's a, kind of a fun environment. But it's hard to be around for a long time because this guru works on you, and authentic teachers really work on you. And there's a lot of people around and there's, your stuff comes up. So it takes a lot of courage to spend a lot of time around Amma or a being who is a Satguru, who is a real teacher, because they also don't pacify you. They're not Santa Claus. They're not there to make you happy. And this is something that a lot of people have a problem with. They don't know this. And it's tempting to say that Westerners have this idea, but Indians as well, people all around the world have this idea. Because Amma is, especially such a loving being. She's so loving and so gentle in one sense, but she's also a guru. She's not there to make you happy. She's there to disturb you in one way or another. And, again, because the guru works in such an amazing way, she disturbs you, but because she's so compelling and beautiful and there's so much love and beauty there, you don't mind. You are, you're very compelled to go back. So this is what a great Satguru and master knows how to do. They know how to keep you close so that you'll keep going back, learning what you need to learn. Even though it's hard. It's like making you take your medicine. So that's my experience. But again, even just this transition between Scorpio and Sagittarius is big for the next couple days. Excuse me before I take a drink. And so this Gandanta point between Jeshta and Mula is really big. So after the moon passes through the Scorpio Jeshta nakshatra, then Mula is related to the goddess Kali, very powerful. It's about this uprooting quality, this quality of pulling out by the roots and planting seeds of depth and truth, and really it's like a rebirth. Again, because this archetypal relationship between Scorpio and Sagittarius is very important. Scorpio is really kind of like the dark night of the soul. It's very much like eighth house kind of qualities. And it's where we, in many ways, face our own death. But it's the death of the ego. It can be very egotistical in that sense because it's the ego dying and kind of hanging on and kind of scared and defending some limited version of reality. In the negative sense, again, it can get very stuck on that and just defending, well, you should treat me this way, and get all righteous and worked up. But it's really about the ego death that we hopefully have the courage to face. But after we do that, we emerge on the other side in the Sagittarius realm of a great teaching, a great principle emerges, a great sense of hope and purpose and meaning emerges on the other side. And that's how these nakshatras line up as well. This is how these Gandanta points line up. And of course, this is sidereal. This is the wisdom and integrity of the sidereal zodiac. Of course, in every Vedic astrology text, it says that the zodiac begins with Aries and Ashwini at the beginning. So what they do is they define it right there at the beginning. They don't need to say it 15 times or define it every point. But if Aries and Ashwini are at the beginning, then Jeshta and Mula are right here. So of course the two zodiacs, quote, were always aligned. It's not even two zodiacs, it's one zodiac, and then one is the calendar measurement. So these things were always separate, and India always measured the sky sidereally, as did all the ancient traditions. It wasn't until the 9th century, really, that the tropical zodiac became even really done in a standardized formal way. So this is clear in all the texts, but again, this integrity of this Jeshta Mula Gandanta point where Scorpio becomes Sagittarius is really built into those signs and those nakshatras, where that struggle in Jeshta to really stay connected to that spiritual and emotional heroism and courage leads to the righteous uprooting of our false teachings and our dark mind, that darkened mind clouded by emotional confusion, which is the problem of Scorpio. And then we plant those seeds of truth in Mula Nakshatra right here at the beginning of Sagittarius. So the roots and the foundation of our spiritual life and our beliefs are things that are righteous and true and worthwhile. Authentic, pure teachings through the Sagittarius principle, right? So we already have teachings that are based on, teachings, and we're following wisdom that's based on that dark part of your mind and heart. You have to understand, you only have as much spiritual wisdom and truth, which is the Sagittarius Jupiter principle. Your teachings only go as deep as you've worked through all of that emotional pain and drama and fear of Scorpio, of that darker energy. So however much you've worked through that darker energy, your teachings and your gurus and the depth that you've gone with them will be reflected. They're a continuum. One is a continuum of the other. This is why it's so important, again, to really uproot those, first really work through the kind of pathology and paranoia and difficulty of Scorpio in order to plant those deeper seeds in Sagittarius. And in Mula Nakshatra, that's the first one, to uproot and plant new seeds. So again, it's a very transformative full moon. It's before the eclipse, because the next lunation cycle is that solar eclipse up here in Ardra Nakshatra in Gemini. So, very important and powerful. If people have some questions, they can maybe post some questions, and I'll try to answer them, especially if they have something to do with this subject. And by the way, those who want to, if you want to see how this affects your sign, you can join my member site, which is only 50 cents. 1 second. Sometimes this thing is, and the member site is at astrologytraininglab.com. I'll type it in here. And I'm going to be doing the members update after this. And, this is so powerful because I'm just talking about the overall energy right now. This is sort of how we're all experiencing it. Notice how you're experiencing these things. Notice how people are so triggered around their emotional, dramas and their paranoia, and they're looking for good teachings and realizing how much they're living in harmony with good teachings and how much they need to get good teachings and how much they need to really double and triple down all these things that they thought they knew, they really have no idea about. That's because we're in this cycle now. And again, this full moon is bringing it out. And all these planets in Gemini and Sagittarius are showing it. Oops, I spelled it wrong. It's a training with an I. Let me do it again. It's training, not trining. Astrology Trining Lab. That's pretty cool. It's training, though, not trining. So let me do it again. Spell it correctly. AstrologyTrainingLab.com. That's it. Let me delete this one. Remove. Okay, so it's... Oh, I did it again wrong. Oh my God, I'm terrible. Let me remove that one too. 1 second. I'm getting my Astrology Training Lab. There it is. I think I got it right this time. So anyway, but yeah, we can look at the general forecast like we're doing now, but the personalized forecast, at least the qualities of knowing how this affects you based on your rising sign, is even more important, because it's more important that you understand that this full moon happening in Sagittarius is in your 10th house if you're Pisces, or it's in your 5th house if you're a Leo, or it's in your 7th house if you're a Gemini. So it's this quality that's the most important for the next 30 days for you. And that quality of this cycle is what you're working on all the time, whether you know it or not. And this is typically what happens, is people are going through their life and they're studying the wrong things. They don't know that this is actually more important, much more important than any of the other stuff that you should be paying attention to with this full moon. And again, we pay attention to other things, like, for example, someone asked, does being born on a full moon have a different effect on these positions? Again, everything is different, but being born on a full moon just means that full moons that's your tithi, if that's actually when you were born. I don't know your chart. Some people might think it's a full moon, but it's not actually one. It might be a little after. So anyway, when it comes back to the actual tithi each month, then it shows that part of your mind feels somewhat natural to you when it comes back to the same tithi. Like, for instance, I was born on Shukla Ekadashi, so it's the 11th lunar day of the waning moon. That's my tithi. So that day feels the most aligned with who I am. That's all we can know. What I'm describing here, though, is very different. These are based on cycles, okay? So what you can know about the same tithi is that it feels like that part of your mind comes back each month. But that's every month. If you are actually born on Purnima, which is a specific tithi, then that tithi, that part of it will feel like, okay, that feels like me. But that has nothing to do with the things I'm talking about. What I'm talking about, where this falls, where Sagittarius falls, like if you're Virgo, this would be a strong emphasis on the 4th house. These are the areas of life that are being activated. That's more important in the sense of how we're experiencing it and what our karmic lessons are throughout the year than, I would say, having the tithi aligned. So, someone, Invest in You, said, good teachings is a must. Many YouTubers make up info or teach through their emotions, not the greatest teachings. Right, that's true. Things aren't backed up by texts or even understanding and interpreting them correctly. Just kind of a lot of emotions or beliefs and then projections. Honestly, a lot of the stuff about the zodiac is just fact-free. I mean, there's just these beliefs about things, not backed up by anything. And in fact, everything in the text backs up without any contradiction what I say here. But people people believe something, and then they cherry pick and find anything they can find in a text somewhere to try to make it be scientific. And if you don't know better, if you don't know that's what you're looking at, it might seem impressive. And it is impressive for a while until people start speaking out and showing the truth again, which, that's... So there's a lot of that, a lot of just constant, like a lot of opinions about things, and things aren't really delineated. That's what I notice. So CJ says, does this full moon connect with the upcoming eclipse or the Rahu Ketu current placements and the issues they bring about? Yeah, what I said was that this is the lunation cycle before the eclipse, that the next lunation cycle is an eclipse. So this really kind of starts the eclipse cycle. It starts it in the sense of, the next two lunation cycles after this will be eclipses. So it's kind of opening the energy. We're right in there because you can see that this full moon does happen, as you correctly pointed out, with the sun join the node and Ketu join the other node. And so the next one is going to have the moon over here being eclipsed in Ardra Nakshatra. Then the next lunation is going to have the eclipse, the full moon lunar eclipse, at the very end of Sagittarius as well. That one's also at the end of Sagittarius. So, Invest in You is talking about her chart, saying, is it nuts? Everyone's chart's nuts somewhat. Parashara assigns one graha as a karaka to each house, if I remember correctly, and it's quite elegant. Why Vedic astrologers add karakas? For example, Mars is for third, but sometimes Mercury is added. Well, you look at a few things there. There's karaka is it just means indicator. So you got to know what you're saying here. There's many ways to add karakas to things. Planets are natural karakas for indicators, like Venus is the indicator or karaka of relationships. It's called Ashtira karaka. Ashtira means fixed. So it means it's always fixed. It's always that. So Jupiter is the Shtira karaka, or the fixed karaka for children and teachers. Always, that's what it is. And then there are other Shtira karakas, like for houses. Some of that is mentioned. It's less important, and I don't put a lot of importance on the karakas for houses because planets are house rulers. That's much more important than any kind of framework or kind of general indicator for houses. I find it can just be confusing. If people understand how to use it correctly, maybe. But I don't put a lot of... It's not that it isn't... that there's no reason to use it, but again, you're bringing up things that are... You're showing the confusion. Mars for third, but sometimes Mercury is added. Well, because Mercury has a lot to do with third house energy. I think even more than Mars, actually. So again, it's not important. It's important to be able to interpret these things, Sebastian. You've been studying off and on through these videos a lot. I don't know if you've ever taken a course that I know of, but you gather a lot through these videos. It's less important to be able to identify things and more important to be able to explain them. So if you can interpret these things, then you'd know why Mars has a karaka of third house quality, but Mercury is just as valid. If you know what third house is, you see why Mercury is just as plausible if you're going to use planetary karakas for houses. Again, I don't really even bother with it that much. I use it for a general indicator, but it's not as important. When you start doing precise work, I don't teach my advanced students to pay much attention to the planet as a karaka for the thing. Sometimes it's more better than others, but in general, Once you're looking at a specific chart, we already know what the house is and we already know what the ruler is. So that's much more specific. But I get what you're saying. If you're looking at the living things, Mars is a great karaka for the third house, siblings, and the will, but Mercury also. So it's not a mistake. Everything's about interpretation. If you know how to interpret these things, it's not a problem. So a lot of these questions, these kinds of questions, come not because things that are said are wrong or even confusing. They're not wrong or confusing. The problem is if you don't know how to interpret it, it's just information and data that you're gathering, then you're comparing data to this data, that data, and confused by data. But data is always confusing. Knowledge is usually not confusing at all, especially when it's wisdom. When you actually understand what it means, it's really not confusing. You can explain it very easily. But again, one of the things I'm always careful of when I start teaching advanced and actually really how to do it correctly is I'm always careful not to give data that could be confusing. That's why I say when I start to actually teach people how to do it correctly, I usually drop all the planets as karaka stuff, at least if we're looking to be predictive and accurate, because it's much more correct and much less confusing to use house lords as any specific chart. By the way, other kinds of karakas are chara karakas, which are movable, and you see them in Gemini astrology, where the karaka for the relationship is the dara karaka, and for the child is putra karaka, and all that. Those are movable chara karakas, which change for every chart. Angela, how did they calculate everything? Was with math. They knew math. And you had astrologers who were mathematicians. Maybe they didn't, and they did, there are different qualities of astrology back in the ancient times. Some people say that all the ancient astrologers were astronomers, and they're really not. They weren't all astronomers. There were astronomers that were actually versed in calculating, and they published ephemerides, or what we now call an ephemeris, and many, like village astrologers or whatnot, used ephemerides, or they used an ephemeris to find where the planets were. Nodes were calculated like anything else. They're no different. But you have to understand that all the ancient astrology, all the ancient math formulas were developed to calculate planets. In fact, those who began to study ancient astronomy and the history of ancient astronomy those who were studying ancient mathematics and how mathematics came about wound up also studying ancient astronomy because they're the same study. Ancient mathematics from Greece and Babylon and India and Egypt were all based on how to calculate the movements of the planets. That's where math came from. This is why all math formulas are based on astronomical cycles. For example, 360 degrees in a circle isn't a coincidence. It's because there's about 360 degrees in a year. 360 days. 365 and a quarter, but it's about 360, and mathematically that's a very powerful number. Everything is based on that. So they calculated the nodes like they calculated everything else with math. And you had certain astrologers were also astronomers, especially the ones who wrote in the very ancient texts, and especially the sage Lagada, who wrote this, Vedanga Jyotisha, and also Varahamihira later. A lot of math formulas, the authors of the Surya Siddhanta and whatnot. But then you had texts that were just based on the analysis of the chart. Once the chart's calculated, here's how you analyze it. So you had astronomy was one branch of astrology, was part of Jyotish. And they weren't always the same people, they weren't always the same disciplines. You had people that calculated the astronomy and they made books of them called ephemeris, and the astrologers would use that. This definitely happened a lot as astrology became more of a standard practice. And you see it a lot, especially once India started mixing with other cultures like Persians, especially Babylonians and Persians. In the 6th, 8th centuries, by the 6th, 7th, 8th centuries especially, a lot of the Persians started making ephemerises. And of course, all of these are sidereal. Look, this is the reason why we know the sidereal zodiac was used. There's nothing but history that there is no debate with probably dozens of historians who have looked into these ancient texts. All of it was sidereal. Sidereal sky, positions along the ecliptic, marked by stars, but also measuring space. There's no dispute about any of that. And we know because we have the ephemerises. Okay? So this is all very standard science. And actually not even science, but history. Science and history. So all of this is all very standard. Someone asked about, she's heard that after 40 you put more emphasis on the Vamsha or something like that. Always confused with this. Yep, you're hearing people say confusing things. Nothing anywhere that Navamsha should be looked at more after 40 and all these vague things. So, nope. But again, these are things you have to learn how to do it. You know, if you're just picking up stuff on the internet, this is what you're going to get. So, again, I don't know how much you actually study, but how much are you really able to read these charts anyway? Do I put more emphasis on my Navamsha? Well, let's say that you did. Do you really know how to interpret it very well? I'm not saying you don't, but I'm saying, or stick with the D1. Again, you use both charts, but you use them correctly. And it's not just Navamsha, it's 16 harmonic charts, Shadasha Vargas. You use all of them, you use them correctly, coordinated with dashas, transits. You have to know how to read it all correctly, though. You know? So, I don't know, maybe you do. But, of course, honestly, when I hear the question, I hear someone who hasn't really studied very much and has picked this up from somewhere, because I know people say this, and you hear people just say this. I don't know where they get it. I'd love to see the source of this, because I've heard it too forever. People ask. This is one of the things I get. Anyway, so no, you always read the charts correctly. It always starts with a Rashi chart, and then the divisional charts are also read, appropriate to when you read them, and dashas and transits all work into the same matrix, right? So everything's appropriate when it's appropriate and how it's done. So there's a proper way to do it. So a karmic cycle to let go of things that don't serve your mind for highest good. Saturn, Ketu, Moon. I don't know. I'm not looking at a chart. So regarding Moon, any remedies you can suggest to prepare regarding this full moon? Well, again, all this stuff, what I'm showing is I'm talking about the energy. So all of this stuff that's related to these deep meditations, look, it's very simple. That people think that Vedic astrology is the science of giving a lot of remedies. And I'll be very, it's not controversial to say that's not really the science. And by the way, the remedies are easy, but they're very hard at the same time. I just said one thing. Everyone says they would love to meet an enlightened being. They would love to meet a divine being. They would love to meet God in the body. What if God in the body came and sat right in front of you? Would you go? Everybody says, oh, yeah. And then I say, well, she's actually coming. Why don't you go? Oh, I'm busy. I got to work. Or, oh, this or that. Or they might go once, and then because it's intense, we can't handle it very long. If I said there's something simple that you could do every day for a half hour, hour a day at the most, and doing this very simple stuff will connect you straight to the source, bring peace, stillness, balance all the doshas, deal with all of the astrology. You just need to do this simple thing, these couple simple things every day. Would you do it? Everyone says, yes, what is it? And I tell them, and no one will do it. And it's literally simple stuff, like simple, let's say, gentle yoga asana practices, simple breath awareness, meditation, pranayama, simple relax into the nature of the self, with stillness, silence, 10, 15 minutes to a half hour a day. Just start that. No one will do it. No one does it. Instead, what's the remedy? What's the gem? What's the thing? What's the food? Tell me the complicated thing I need to do. It's not complicated. You're not special. You're not special. Just like you're not special when it comes to curing a headache. What's the special mantra I need to cure the headache? There isn't one. Take an aspirin like every other human being, and your headache will go away because it's a blood thinner, an anticoagulant. You're an organism that functions a certain way, and we have a science to do that. Very simple. What's your spiritual dilemma? It's very simple. The remedies are simple. Yoga asana practice, very simple one. Moving your body a certain way moves the energy. Breathing a certain way connects you to the source. I guarantee it works. I guarantee you. It's the same remedy for everyone, and no one does it. Again, I'm not being sarcastic. I'm just telling you that people always ask this of astrologers. And astrologers will tell them things. And again, maybe people will do it and maybe they'll get a little relief for a while, but it's not addressing the deeper issue. The deeper core issues is people don't know how to meditate and they don't know the nature of the self. It's not something you can learn the structure of this and the sort of architecture of the soul and how it's laid out with astrology. You can. And astrology answers the question in the mind that says, how does all this work? How is all this working? Who am I and why am I here? That's what it does. But then you need to drop out of that into coming into balance and harmony with the energies themselves through sadhana, spiritual practice, surrender, service, and these kinds of things. And again, there's no question about this. This has been known for thousands of years. And those people who, someone says, if working out would be considered spiritual practice, I would be enlightened. Okay, well, working out, again, is a very, very difficult, that's a different, quality to, that's a different kind of spiritual, that's a different kind of physical exercise. Someone says, I kind of have a tendency to talk down to people. Well, you're watching this video and that's your view, and that's okay. What I'm doing is kind of getting through this idea, and maybe that is talking down. Sorry if it is, if you experience it that way. What I'm trying to do is show, because we complicate things very much, and a lot of people don't understand what the purpose is of astrology and all of this. And the purpose is to understand things, and we think that it's some remedy. The remedies are the remedies are always the same thing. We need to actually do spiritual practice, which has to do with, again, meditation, yoga. It's that path. And if you do that, it works scientifically. It's the science of spiritual awakening. And again, that's there for you to hear it or not. And again, I have people now saying, it's not talking down. No, I appreciate what the person is saying. And, what sounds like it's talking down to you means that you don't want to hear this. Because you wanted another answer. And because there's a question being here and I'm answering from here. It is kind of down, but I'm not talking down to anyone in the sense of judging them like you're doing something, like you're a failed human being. It's that on this level, the Indian teachings are very consistent, and Jyotish is not that science. Remedies mainly come from yoga and Ayurveda. Ayurveda is are the daily practices that are based on principles of life and healing that has to do with if you have a sort of tendency to be more fiery, for example, then you need to do things that calm down the fire. If you tend to be more sedentary and more, slow, then you need to actively do things to, enliven your physiology and get you moving more and other kinds of things. And then working with environmental factors. This is what Ayurveda does day to day so that you can stay in balance, so that you can meditate and do yoga and connect with the source directly. So I started talking about this part because, again, the solutions and the remedies are simple, but no one will do it because they're also very hard. They're very hard because the ego dies. And by the way, I'll just be very honest because I'm an honest person. It's your ego that feels insulted by me and saying that I'm talking down to you. It's your ego that says, "Oh, you're talking down," or something. And so, again, words are just sort of neutral. And we're definitely at the point of being triggered, especially with this. I talked about at the beginning of the forecast with the Scorpio moon. This is the kind of thing that, again, this is how we can get triggered at this time. And so, again, I apologize if it seems that way. But I think it's pretty clear that... And by the way, I know that people do this in live chats. I address it because I think it's also I think it's important to hear. I don't feel like it's distracting to talk about this because, again, this is what a lot of people can think, and it's very easy to see that or notice what comes up when someone speaks directly at these larger truths. Because, again, we want something that we think is easy. Like, what's the remedy for this? And again, authentic remedies are hard. They're challenging. And again, I say it's hard, but it's also very easy. The easiest thing in the world would be, you would think, to sit still and connect to the source. And sit and connect to your heart. But why is that the hardest thing in the world for us? And again, I'm going there in this conversation or broadcast. I'm going in it because this is what's up for us now. This is what's up. This Scorpio Sagittarius is what's up right now for us all. How able are we to do this kind of work? Because the work that we have to do is literally to destroy the ego. And it's not easy work. It's not easy for the ego. It's very easy for the mind to think that we can do it. But just think about how simple that is. So besides that, one of the things that we can also do, and the things that we're compelled to do with the Sagittarius, because it's a Sagittarius theme, is, again, study authentic teachings. Study authentic teachings. Where the problem is now in our mind and world, especially, and what's coming to a head right now in this full moon, is that we're not connected to authentic teachings. We're not connected to pure teachings. We have a lot of bad teachings that we think are correct, and we're following bad teachings. Just, for example, socially, we're indoctrinated into a worldview of commercialism and politics, and all this stuff is the point of the world. This is the meaning of the world, is all that stuff. When actually it's not. That's not the point of your life. You did not incarnate to vote a certain way or do this or do that. Those are a part of life, and we need to take care of them because we live in a culture, we have society, responsibilities to each other, but you're here to know the truth of who you actually are. Are your teachings reflecting that? Are the things that you actually believe and that anchor your life actually reflecting a worldview that is worthy? So are you really imbibing from pure teachings? Again, a lot of you who are watching this astrology are here because you're looking for a higher purpose, for a higher inspiration, and a higher meaning and purpose. So now is the time, this next month or so, to really evaluate your teachings and whether or not you're following authentic teachers and teachings. It's great that you're interested in astrology and this higher wisdom, but again, even within that, as we know, we live in a world now where everybody who can turn on a webcam and plug into YouTube is an expert. But are they really? I'm not disparaging anyone personally or individually. I think everybody's trying to help each other. I don't think people are out to hurt each other. I think people are doing their best. But that doesn't mean that people have put in, that they have the experience or that they research or that there's just such a range of good and bad teachings right now, even in astrology, not to mention just in life. So now is a time to really notice that. And by the way, if you've been watching anything I've said for the last couple months, you know I've been saying this for months, since the end of March, that when Rahu went into Gemini, now is going to be the time where all of these bad teachings are going to get revealed. Now that we have an eclipse in Gemini, it's even more so. We're going to start seeing the truth get blown up. Because the truth is really related to Gemini, the facts, and the real information, where people are going to notice, wow, you know what, I was believing all this stuff, and geez, here's the real teaching here. Here's the real truth. Here's the real facts. So again, I wouldn't call that a remedy, but the remedy is very much about these things related to the sign. And this nakshatra of Mula is to uproot these bad teachings, these beliefs that aren't taking you anywhere. So besides that, the main spiritual remedies, and the main remedies are the same. Yoga, asana, pranayama, same as it ever was, man. And it's the simplest and the most beautiful. Angela asked a very good question, and it's, can your guru Amma or another enlightened being give you all the knowledge in one snap if they wanted to? The answer is yes, they could do whatever they want. But would they do it? Of course not. Why wouldn't they do it? Because that's a violation of Dharma. They would no more do that than they would kill somebody. Because it's simply not, it's a violation of Dharma. You came here as a result of your karma and your actions. Your purpose is to evolve and to develop and to live the experience that you're here to live. Now, again, when I say it's a violation of Dharma, this means that the incarnation, there's nothing wrong with it. Again, to interfere would be to interfere with the purpose of everything. And the whole illusion here is the premise of the question. So what I mean is this, and by the way, I answer your question because a lot of people who are around gurus know that this question is asked all the time. I see my friend Jeff Poole here, who also contributes every day to the Astrology Training Lab, which, by the way, I'm going to put that up again. Those who want to get forecasts for 2 weeks and see how this full moon will affect them can join. But Jeff Poole, who has been a devotee of Sri Sri Ravi Shankar, I'm sure has also heard devotees all the time say, why doesn't Guru Dev just make us all enlightened? Well, because first of all, it's supposing that there's something wrong with what's going on now. It's supposing that there's something wrong with your state of existence now. And it's not. Your state of existence is fine. They would no more interfere with that than, again, like I say, kill somebody or something. Your incarnation comes from the divine, and it's all in perfect alignment. And not only would they not do that, but they're not going to interfere at all. And in fact, it's one of the things I had to learn about being around Amma. And I learned this a few years ago when one of my, what's called Guru Bhai, or one of my Amma brothers, talked to me. Actually, I was having a conversation, and a lot of people go up and ask Amma a lot of questions. They ask her questions a lot. at that time had never asked her a question because it's not because it's not like I felt like it would have been wrong or bad. It's just I never felt like I really wanted to ask her a question. And he told me, he said, well, Amma wants us to ask her questions, at least sometime. He said, not only, it's not just the question, he said, but then you're giving her the permission to answer you. Because she's not going to just interfere. If you just go up and get darshan, if you just go up and get a hug from her, because this is what Amma does, is she hugs people. If you just go up and give a hug, she'll give you the hug, and then that's the end of it. She's not going to stop in the hug and start telling you something if you don't ask. So when you ask her a question, you're giving her the permission to answer you and to basically tell you whatever it is that she thinks you need to hear, especially if you ask her that as well. Like, anything else I need to hear? So it was a wonderful lesson. And so I did ask her a question. And it turned into an amazing experience, which I'll tell another time. I've already spoken for quite a while. But it was an amazing experience. And by the way, I thought to myself, well, let me think of a question. And I asked a really important question. Because if she could have said something, or she could have said anything, I was very nervous too. By the time I was like, okay, now I'm going to ask her a question, it really was like, okay. And the end of the question, though, I asked her the question. And then the last part of it was, is there anything else you want to tell me that I need to know for my spiritual development? And again, that's the loaded part of it. Because she could say anything. She might say something like, give up your whole life and move to India. Or go do this. Or become a monk. Or, I don't know. She could have said anything. And I was like, God, what if she says that? I'm opening myself up now to have her say anything. And tell me what I need to hear. And trust, because she's my guru, trust that it's what I need to hear. And then I kind of need to do it. So it's definitely not a small thing. And again, that wasn't the reason I didn't ask her before. I never thought of it. I just didn't feel like I wanted to. In some ways, I didn't feel like I wanted to bug her, actually. And I asked her many things internally and got much guidance internally. My whole astrology career, by the way, was like, I laid it at the feet of Amma and said, Amma, I'm going to try to do this with your blessing. I had her bless my book, this book. I had her bless it. And so things that I've done, I'll take them up and have her bless them and do little things, but not, again, these questions where I get her to answer me and help to, counsel me in my life. And again, a lot of people did, do that a lot. They're always doing it. And by the way, because I do a lot of readings for Amma devotees, they'll bring it to me. Because Amma's confused. She'll confuse you. Again, she's a guru. She's not Santa Claus. So, of course, people go up to Amma and they'll ask her things like, Amma, should we move to Hawaii because I have an allergy and da-da-da-da, and if we should do it, when should we do it? Or whatever it is, something. And again, I'm not judging it. Amma wants people to do that. She says, come and ask me, and, and then she'll answer, and it'll be like something like, she's playing games. It's a Leela. If you ever read the Srimad Bhagavatam, Krishna's always playing with the devotees. And she plays with me too, by the way. This is not just questions. She's played with me for years in different ways. But, Amma, the answer will be something like, a whole little drama will play out. She won't answer them directly, or it'll be something like, she'll shake her head and go, well, if you think this, da-da-da, or there'll be a drama. There's often a Leela with the Swami, because you have to have a Swami ask her. So you tell the Swami in English, you write it down, and then the Swami talks to you about it, and then they ask Amma, and then Amma tells the Swami, and then the Swami tells you. And it's this old kind of drama where people I don't know, I kept, I asked the Swami, and I kept having to get it straight with him, and he didn't really, I don't know if he really understood, and if he asked Amma correct, and Amma answered that, and then when he explained it back to me, he had to ask her 3 or 4 times. This whole kind of thing. So they'll ask me what I think Amma meant. It's really funny. So then they'll ask me to look in the chart and see, do you see we're going to be moving, or la 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 la. And I always come back to this. I don't lose sight of what Amma is there for. And I just say, look, you have to understand, again, because they want Amma to be Santa Claus to some extent. And just tell me what to do, right? And she is careful not to interfere. She is answering you the way you should have gotten it. And I have to tell them, all of that Leela and drama with the Swami was all Amma's orchestration. This isn't the Swami screwing you up with Amma. And again, because people get all kinds of ideas. I don't think the Swami likes me, so I don't think he did that. And there's just all kinds of stuff. None of that's going on. The whole thing is orchestrated by Amma to get you to go up and ask, to go through that, to have the thing come back, and to have you still confused and not sure what to do. So what do you think that means? What do you think that tells you based on what we just talked about in your chart? Because this will often come at the end of a reading after I've already talked about a whole lot of stuff that's going on in there. I've already talked about, because I wait for the end of the reading to get that kind of stuff. I've already talked about what's going on, and they've already heard me explain things before I even knew that happened. And they're like, okay, now I understand why it happens. Now I understand what it meant. Yes, it was meant to confuse you so that you'll take action. You're here to take action. Back to Angela's question. I see Jeff Poole said, I get those same questions from devotees. Yes, because Jeff does a lot of readings as well. By the way, if you're looking for readings, there's a guy there, Jeff Poole, is right there. He does readings a lot with a lot of devotees and whatnot. And I'm sure he recognizes this too. What did it mean when I interacted with Guruji and blah, 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 blah. And like, you always bring it back to what was left in your mind, because it's your relationship with the Guru. The Guru there's no mistakes. The Guru didn't make a mistake. And again, people will often think Amma made a mistake, or this one made a mistake, or she didn't hear it correctly. No, it's like, do you think she's a Guru or not? Like, do you think she's who she is or not? Do you think she's really going to screw up? And the whole thing's going to be screw up? I mean, it's really funny. You know, it's just that whole, you know, it's just the Leela. And it's a mirror for people to also look at themselves. And, you know, again, most of the time, it's wanting to get us, not most of the time, every time, it's always about us needing to introspect about who we are, what we want, and to trust ourselves and trust in the Guru. And often, now other times there's a direct answer. Especially when there's somebody's health involved, or someone's about to get sick or something. And by the way, it's one of the things, if Amma tells you to do something, this is why, even when I asked the question, I knew whatever she was going to tell me was going to be what I need to do. So again, it was pretty scary, because she could have said anything. And I know I should have done it. And it could have upended my whole world. I didn't think that would happen, but at the time I was already successful astrologer, you know, and I don't know if I had a big ego about it. Maybe I do. I mean, I guess we all have a healthy enough ego to do it. I was already out there. I was doing this and doing that. She could have said, stop practicing astrology, go live here and do something. I don't know what she could have said anything. And I would have done it, I think. I don't know. If she would have said something that was like, you know, and if I wouldn't have done it, I don't know what would have happened. You know, so again, it was not, by the time I was doing it, I was like, boy, this is pretty scary. So whatever it is, you know that it's for your own good. And so, for example, when people do come up, especially if there's a health problem or some little thing, and Amma, let's say, gets really serious, and then says, go to the doctor and do what they tell you. And it's like, she'll tell you that. If she does give something a clear, like, then you do it. Because she wouldn't be doing that if it wasn't very serious, or at least what you absolutely needed to hear. So if there's, you know, you always have to trust that she knows the situation. Before you even ask the question, she knows the situation. And so if you come up and ask, you're giving her permission to answer, and then it's up to you to then listen. And again, how often do you think, it happens many times, where people will come up let's say like with, I don't know, a partner, a relationship partner, and they'll ask a question to Amma about the partner, and Amma might be like, again, she's not going to interfere, but she might be like, well, do you have this? And she might ask them questions and try to get them to see that maybe this isn't the partner for me. And she'll kind of lead them to that thing, or maybe this is what I should do or shouldn't do. She'll lead you to seeing that outcome. And again, she's gentle. She comes off like a friend. And she's trying to be like a friend to let you see, do you really think this is the right thing? Do you really think that's the right person? Or that you should be doing that? Again, only if you ask. But when you ask, she'll lead you to the answer. But again, many times people don't want to hear the answer. So they'll even ask me, again, in the same situation, what do you think she meant? I said, well, I think she meant what she said. Sounds pretty clear to me. It just sounds like you don't want to follow it. And that's why you're having a sort of conundrum. Yeah, so it's very interesting how this stuff works. And so again, the question about why doesn't the guru just make us all enlightened? Because again, she is the force. Again, we also have to understand this last thing I'll say is we tend to focus on Amma or Gurudev or Guruji, Sri Ravi Shankar or any of these beings. We tend to focus on them as being this person in a body who has some state of awareness. We see that because that's how we vibrate. They are not that being in a body. They are literally an embodiment of Dharma, of truth, of all of this stuff we're talking about. The reason you're in a body dealing with your karma, you might say, is because of her. You might even say it's her fault. And by the way, people do all the time. Amma, why don't you just make us all enlightened? Because you got karma, dude. You work it out. I've done enough. I've incarnated in a form. I am the wisdom of the universe that is here to allow you to evolve. And I've incarnated in a body so you can see it. Again, people sitting right in front of an embodiment of Dharma, of divine enlightenment. And they're pissed off because she won't violate the entire law of the universe that she's ordered, that she's created, that she is embodying. She would no more violate that than kill somebody, like I said, because she is the embodiment of all of that. And that's divine will. That is Dharma and karma. That's what's governing the whole universe. So again, it strains the mind when we think that that there's anything other than Dharma and karma behind everything. And so these beings are keenly aware of all of that. And again, there's an embodiment of that pure wisdom. And, I'll give you one last reason, or one last way that this is illustrated in the scriptures. What do you think would happen if we had as much power, if you, with your crazy ego and your power-hungry ways, and you don't think you are, but you are, what do you think you would do with as much power as one of these Sadgurus and these enlightened beings? And I'm talking about the power to read people's minds, the power to know everything, the power to kind of an embodiment of this. What do you think you would do with that? You think you would abuse that power? I think you would. This is why you have these stories in the text about asuras. This is what asuras are. They get the power. This is what Rahu is. They're drunk on power. They say, oh, you mean all I need to do is say, 10,000 mantras a day for 5 years and then I'll gain victory over death? And that's like, okay, then I'll do it. And they'll do this intense tapas and then get so powerful that they can challenge the gods. And then they try to destroy the whole universe and keep it all for themselves because now they got the same power the gods have, but they don't have the consciousness. They don't have the awareness. This is why we have these yogic practices. This is why we open the Kundalini gently, because the Kundalini is that power, and it opens gently through yogic practices and pranayam and kriyas and all of that, so that our power is in alignment with our consciousness. You get too much power without the consciousness, then you just overpower others and burn yourself out and create a lot of destruction. You got to understand these states of awareness, this thing that we call enlightened, make us all enlightened. Again, we don't even know what that is. Don't even know what that is. This is pure merging with the infinite power of the universe. You can't handle it. You can't handle the truth. It'd blow your brains out. I mean, literally, your nervous system would explode. You would go crazy, probably. You'd probably have this psychotic Kundalini episode. Again, things are the way they are because that's your level of consciousness and awareness. You can't plug a 20,000 watt, or you can't plug a 5 watt light bulb into a 20,000 watt circuit. It will blow up. So you want to understand that, especially as it relates to the Kundalini and these higher states of consciousness, your level of awareness is where it is to protect you. It's the goddess protecting you. It's to protect you. It's to protect you because your nervous system isn't wired yet for those higher states of awareness. And by the way, this is why people take drugs and then have these psychotic episodes. What do you think that is? What do you think those psychotic episodes are of people hearing voices and their aura blown open and all that stuff? Again, you can open the Kundalini and crack open your whole astral body with drugs. This is why people that keep taking a lot of drugs connect and they're connecting with that greater power through chemical, wind up losing their mind. So your level of awareness is where it is to protect you because that's how much energy you're able to handle. So yoga, kriyas, all of these practices build up your what's called ojas, build up your spiritual power. That's why brahmacharya or celibacy was practiced. Not as a judgment, not to judge, not to say sex is bad, but if you want to build up your ojas and your power, literally in your nerves, literally physical power and emotional astral power in your astral body, you need to hold and retain the sexual energy. Because the sexual energy, when you retain it, it goes up. Rather than going down through the sexual expression, it goes up. And then that's what makes the Kundalini rise. That's what Kundalini is rising. It's transmuted sexual power, sexual energy. And then, of course, once the Kundalini opens and you have that more sexual energy, you become more sexually attractive, and then you have the desire to express it and then fall back down. This is why those earliest chakras are the hardest to work with, because you start to get that benefit and become very sexually magnetic and attractive. This is why you'll see a lot of these gurus and asuras and the energy that they get once they do start to perform this and get this power, they become very charismatic and sexually. Again, look at all of how many, especially in the West, all these religious leaders who wind up having some spiritual power, and what's the first thing they start doing? They start having sex with everybody's wives. They get into that kind of thing. They become very magnetic, and you're like, how does all this happen? How do these men turn their wives over, and how does this kind of thing happen? Because that first chakra, when the Kundalini opens, revolves around all of that. Actually, the second one, but they're still working on that sexual energy. The first chakra has maybe opened, and then they're in that second one where they're trying to work through that sexual issue, that charisma of the second chakra. So that's a very deep conversation. But again, these enlightened beings are an embodiment of Dharma. They're an embodiment of karma, of your karma, and of the wisdom of the cosmos. And they would no more violate those laws than, again, kill somebody or do something else. They're an embodiment of that. They're the source of it. And I don't know how often I hear the question. And it shows just not understanding the whole kind of matrix. But anyways, you could tell I enjoyed talking about this today. So you see all these planets now. I think the sun just moved into my first house. So now I got the sun in Gemini, right? So I'm a little chatty. Kind of a chatty Gemini today. Let's see, where are we at? Is it there yet? 6:15. Yeah, it just moved in there. So it's right on my ascendant. So I got all these planets here. And when when Rahu starts getting the sun, I start to feel like, okay, now I'm king. Because I'm the Rahu king. All right, guys. Well, it's good to have the conversation today. I hope you enjoyed it. And again, if you want to see how this will affect your chart and affect you for the next 30 days, you can go at the website there at astrologytraininglab.com. I post there every day. So does Jeff Poole. He posts a very detailed update as well. One of my great students. And you'll also see how this full moon in Sagittarius will affect you, because it's different for each sign. So take care.